Well, welcome to The Patient Physician. My name is Paul Smith, and I am joined today by my co-host, Chris Fulbright. Good
What is
morning,
going
sir.
on, Paul? Good morning. I'm excited about this one. I think Ashley is going to impact a lot of lives with this. So I'm excited to have our next guest with us.
I think she probably has already impacted a lot of lives,
Yeah,
but
yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
think the goal for having her on today is definitely to continue to expand that effect, because this is an area where, um, gosh, I think there's probably not enough attention, and
Yeah.
and it feels like to me that gosh, we should have probably done a show about this a long time ago, honestly.
Yeah.
And we consistently hear the need for it. A lot of people don't know where to start. So I am also excited to have her on to really talk about some of those things, best practices, but to let everybody else in on who we
Yeah.
have today. We have Ashley Shaw from Contract RX. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you for having me.
And I don't want everybody to cut out of the show. She is an attorney, right? But she is on your side. That's the good news here. Right? I'm sure. Do you get that, Ashley, where people are like, oh, you're an attorney?
Oh, I get that a lot. I think honestly, when it comes to physicians, the response to an attorney really depends on their first interaction with one, right?
Yeah.
You know, there are those who the very first interaction is they've been sued. And
Mm.
we're pretty, it's pretty unpleasant to be on the other side of one when you're being sued because it's a really tough time and you feel it feels pretty personal. And if that's your first experience, there's there a little bit of apprehension. But I do know a good amount of physicians who either have a family member that's a lawyer or they've used lawyers in helpful situations, right, to review a contract or draft a will or some other legal matter. And so it's a bit more of a positive response whenever I say I'm a lawyer because there is more of a mindset of a lawyer is helpful to me versus here to harm me.
Mm.
Well, I think it certainly is. Whose side are you on, right? It certainly feels
Exactly.
better when you're on my side.
It
So,
is. It is. I feel like lawyers have definitely earned our reputation. It's pretty awful when we're not on your side, and it's pretty great when we are.
if it's pretty awful when you're not on someone's side, though, that means you're doing a pretty good job, doesn't it?
Well, it
At
depends,
least for
right? For your
the
client.
person's side you are on, right?
Right. Well, but I also, here's the thing. I also subscribe to any exchange with a lawyer, whether I'm on your side or not, should never feel like you hugged a cactus. Right. And even if I'm not on your side, I shouldn't leave the other person feeling that way because that means I wasn't effective in what I came to do. Right.
Mm.
If I'm entering a space and my goal is to get you to give me something that I want from my client, you feeling like you're hugging a cactus is not going to get me there.
I
Yeah.
love this phrase.
Yeah. How great
Very
is that?
visual,
Yeah.
very meaningful.
Especially
And
here
then,
in Texas, we can visualize that
that's
one
right.
pretty well. Yeah.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
Paul will be
Um,
using that in the team meeting, just to let you know, Ashley. Yeah.
that's right.
Right.
Well,
Everybody
yeah.
go outside and hug a cactus if you didn't
Everyone
turn
hug a
your stuff
cactus.
in.
Let's start 2026. Yeah.
Well, the interest here and why we're both excited is that we continually hear that medical training doesn't prepare physicians for the legal and business aspect, which obviously primarily it shouldn't. They should be great physicians. But what it does leave them subject to is this exposure where some employers may leverage that to their advantage when they're going to negotiate compensation or maybe some overly restrictive terms. I think that sometimes the perception is, well, it's standard, right? That's probably a word that isn't actually true, and that they can't really negotiate it, or it seems, good. I get the sense that they've been in training for so long, and they actually see a compensation number, that salary, finally, and they're so excited about that. They're like, okay, everything else is going to be awesome,
Right.
but it's not, right? And so your feeling really is that everything is negotiable, even for contracts that maybe the employer is saying it's not, right? And
I
if
think
people
that's
just don't know how
right.
to
I
ask
mean,
for it.
I think that's right because I think, and I get that a lot. Like, is this standard? Is it worth reviewing? Can I negotiate? And the answer to me is always everything's negotiable. It depends on your set of circumstances. But I also think it's, the phrase, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people they didn't exist. I think there's an element of that here, right? Where you hear your entire training that this is standard, we don't really change things. And because you're not familiar with legal terms, you really buy into that. And so you just kind of take it as it is. And I think that that is further kind of complicated by I always say that physicians suffer from something that I call conditional compliance, right? Like conditioned compliance, rather. In your entire training, you're trained, suck it up, take what you get through it, and you carry that into your first contracts. I think that as physicians get more senior in their career, they kind of ease up off that. But in the beginning, you're happy to have a job. It's a very stressful situation. It's the first time they actually have a choice as well, because at this point, they might have picked their medical school, but you get in where you get in. You might have picked your residency training that you applied for, but you are matching where you match, and this is the first time you get to choose, and you don't really know what to do with that. And so it's I think that that is a lot of the misperception, that a contract is standard, nothing is negotiable. It depends on what you ask for, it depends on how you ask for it. It also depends on your leverage, and really kind of understanding what that employer needs, what the market is like, and then knowing how to ask for it. And I think if you kind of hit those points, you can overcome that this is standard perception.
So would you say that, with that in mind, that everybody should be talking to a contract attorney?
I think so. I'm a little biased. I'm a contract attorney, right?
I would have been
So
concerned if you didn't say yes,
Yeah,
right?
she's like, nope, nope, 50%. Yeah.
yeah, no, I think every physician should talk with an attorney that focuses on physician contracts, right? So not all employment contracts are the same. They are uniquely different. One, because federal law has different mandates that don't impact other professions. Two, compensation is set so differently, and using different benchmarks and surveys that you don't see in other areas. And hospitals have different considerations than other employers, right? So there are some things that I think are helpful, and when you understand that really impact your ability to advocate for a physician on an employment contract. I always recommend it, even if you are up against an employer that is drawing a hard line. It is really helpful to understand the legal terms. The worst time to find something out is in the moment of something happening, right? You want to leave and now you realize you don't have tail insurance, or you want to
Mhm.
leave, or you joined a place and now you realize you don't have the thing they promised, and now what do you do? This is a little bit of a hammer and a nail situation for me, because people don't call their lawyers on their best day. I
Mhm.
get the call when something has happened too often, and that's the worst time to find out in the moment, because once you've signed the contract, the leverage isn't necessarily there for you to do a lot about it. So I always recommend it. So whether you are trying to get understanding of legal terms, really have an exit strategy, because that's important as well. Understanding the market data around compensation so you know what to ask for, or you just want to negotiate something. I think it's worth having a conversation with a lawyer that specializes in physician contracts.
Absolutely. Really, I couldn't agree more. And I have told people, even at the very minimum, if nothing was able to be changed, wouldn't you just feel better knowing that you had a contract, that you tried your best, you tried to negotiate, you walked away, and at least you got a second opinion from somebody who really knows contracts, knows a lot of different employers, knows the different benefits and the different things that can be offered or not offered.
Mhm.
Wouldn't that be worth that peace of mind for that price?
I think so. And also knowing where the trapdoors are. I think one of the things that we should always keep in mind, lawyers are retained to do and get the best result for their clients. Employers in hospitals and universities, they are no different, right? That document that you have has been drafted by their lawyer. And their job when they drafted it was to include terms in there that benefit their client, that account for all the situations that their client may get into, and to leverage that to their client's advantage. If you don't understand those terms, sometimes it's a sentence, sometimes it's a comma, sometimes it's a including but not without. Like if you don't understand that legal language, you're going to not understand that you might be standing on a trap door until it opens underneath you. And so, it's really important that you have a lawyer that has your best interest in heart. So having that, even if you can't get something changed, even if the lawyer just says, they're drawing a hard line. Here's where we are. Here are the trapdoors. Here's how you avoid them. That is absolutely worth the conversation.
Hmm.
And if you get the right lawyer, because not all lawyers focus on the compensation part. I've kind of learned that over my career. I've made the effort where I really dig into the compensation part. But if you get the right lawyer, they can help you navigate that data and actually get a little bit more money and negotiate a bit better compensation. Lawyers can't make guarantees, but that's usually what I'm able to do for my
Yeah.
clients.
So that's a good point to kind of dig into, is that usually, again, you're either going to get something that's a little bit better for you or
Mhm,
more money, and then you're kind of covering your costs anyway. Not guaranteed, obviously, right? There's
mhm.
the fine print on that. But you said if somebody's really digging into that. Tell me what that's like for you to kind of keep up with that, especially if you're negotiating contracts all over the country. Is
I
that right?
am.
Okay.
Yes.
So how are you keeping up with all the trends and even hospital systems, institutions, educational institutions? On our side, we're seeing where these contracts are evolving, and there's
Mhm,
just not the standard salary, and now it's this, or I'm getting,
mhm.
compensated this way, or it changes to RVUs, da 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 da. So how do you keep up with all that?
Tracking. So I think some of it, so compensation data is really hard for a physician to get a hold of. A lot of times they'll look to the traditional places that people know to look are like salary.com or Google, but that's not where the compensation is. You can find an average salary, right, for a particular specialty online, but that's not what hospitals use. That's not what employers use. And that certainly isn't what they will listen to, right? So one of the sources I use is MGMA data. Every year they put out a report. It comes out in the spring. I evaluate it, and you can filter for a lot of things. I can look by specialty. I can look whether it's academic or private. I can look for call pay. I can look for what a first year would make, all those things, and they give you different percentiles, right? And so I take as much information as I can from my client and I dig into that. Now, there are some things that are a little bit more tricky. Like if you're really more niche, that data isn't the best, and you kind of have to work with what you see. As well as sometimes when data has been out 6 or 7 months, you have to kind of see, well, what's happening this year, right? I'll give an example. In radiology, everyone's fighting over the same docs, right? So we're seeing a significant increase in the signing bonuses that are happening that are not, I think, reflected in MGMA data, right? And then you see different things regionally that you just have to track. For example, there are certain states that people want to move to that are a bit more desirous, like California, Texas, New York, Florida, right? But states like Indiana, Nebraska, Montana, they have a bit harder time recruiting. So even if the data may say expect this kind of bonus or expect this compensation, you understand that your leverage is a bit different. And so I think for me, it's just really kind of tracking all that. And then also keeping track of the systems that negotiate a certain way or have hard lines. Don't get me wrong. There are some systems and some employers that are on my hit list where I have, as soon as I see them, it's a different kind of conversation I have with my client.
They're the cactus. Those are the
They're the
cactus.
cactus.
Yeah. So we're starting a new year. I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but going in, we have a bunch of people that are going to be exiting, changing careers. When's the right time for someone to reach out to you? And what happens if they have multiple offers? How does your firm handle that?
So I think that depends, right? So I look at physicians in three different stages. There are those that are finishing their training. There are those that have been working and changing jobs, and then there are those who have been working, but they may be up for partnership. If you are finishing your training, it depends on where you are in the cycle. Usually, when you enter into your last year, that's when I see people start to look for jobs and when they get offers. The best time to reach out to an attorney is before you sign anything, even if it's an offer, because an employer will tell you that an offer is not binding. But what they don't tell you is that if you sign an offer and you want to try and change that comp later, it's really hard to do that. As you start interviewing, I don't think you necessarily need to have the conversation then, but as you start getting offers, whether it is you need help figuring out what offer to go with and evaluate those offers, or whether you are ready to move forward with one and you just have that term sheet or contract, that's when you should be talking with one when you finish your training. When you are changing jobs, I always recommend having your current contract reviewed as well as the new one, especially if you didn't have help on that first contract, because navigating your exit, understanding how certain payments are made, understanding how your last day can impact that, what your post employment malpractice insurance can look like. Those are all things you need to understand before you tell your employer that you're leaving. And certainly before you finalize terms with the new employer, because you might need some help with any of those things. Right. So I always recommend when you're thinking about starting to change your job or you start interviewing with the new possible job, that's when you reach out. When a physician is at the partner stage, typically you know that you're on the partner path and you have an idea when those documents are coming. As soon as you get those documents, you reach out because oftentimes they don't give you a lot of time to review them, sign them, negotiate them. But those are my general recommendations for when a physician should be reaching out. to a contract lawyer to assist with their contracts.
I kind of equate it to home buying. That you really want to go out and get your pre-approval, get your mortgage set up, know what you can afford, know what you're
Right.
gonna gonna do before you go start shopping for homes. That way, when you actually start negotiating, like you're in the best place possible because you know what you can do, what you're willing. So a little bit of the same where it may sound like, okay, let me go find the home and then let me get the mortgage. Where it's no, it's really better for you to actually have that in place before you even start,
Agreed.
falling in love with something, what kind of things to be looking for. So,
Yeah, I started thinking about this, the changes going on right now in NCAA football, and they've talked about
Mhm.
the portal and these changes. And I was listening the other day, they talked about that these young people, as the 18s to mid 20s, they actually have people that are negotiating for them that aren't even trained professionals. And I started thinking through, like, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even more. And I was like, how vital, right? We have physicians that have now spent 2 decades in school. Some of
Mhm.
them have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans. They've all
Mhm.
spent hundreds of thousands, and yet they're going to take that offer. They're going to take whatever comes across, and they could be leaving a lot of money on the table. Like when you and
Mhm.
I visited before, we had a physician who moved somewhere, took a job she thought she would love, and just turned out she didn't like it. And
Right.
she, and then she had already bought a house and she'd done these things. And then when she thought selling the house was going to be the issue, but unwinding her contract and moving on, she had no idea there were geographical limitations, there were financial limitations, there were a lot of things in that contract she didn't know to look
Right.
at the time. And so I've been super excited. I think this is the perfect time. We talk about specialties. In fact, I was talking to an estate planning expert attorney,
Mhm.
and she was asking about, how's your firm going? How are y'all doing? What are you doing? And she goes, I can't believe I haven't introduced you to Ashley. Like, this is what she does. And that's the importance of having someone like you described
Mhm.
who says, no, no, let me get on your side of the table. Let me
Right.
sit beside you and help you negotiate what's going to match for you. And so I'm
I,
excited to
and I
be able
think
to.
you're right. I mean, I think one of the other things, listen, picking an attorney is a personal choice. You want to pick the one because there's expertise. There is also just kind of whether you get along and whatnot with the attorney as well. But one of the things that I think is missed sometimes when physicians are trying to pick their attorney is what I do is pretty niche, right? Are there lawyers that do physician contracts? Yes. I don't think that there are a lot that just solely focus on it. When you're picking a lawyer that you want on your side, I think that you have a better advantage going with a lawyer that is accustomed to being on the physician side, right? And I don't want to knock experience that you may have working for an employer or a big institution or a system, but any lawyer that sits in that spot, they are accustomed to their standard contract being adhered to and not having to get creative. And that's a lot of what I have to do. When I run into this is our standard language, I have to get creative. I have to dig into the facts. I have to dig into the circumstances to kind of create a solution that works for that particular client. And that is way more effective from someone who's accustomed to doing that. And it also, that person kind of help you think about how you can get creative. And then also kind of think about, over time, what do you want to see? Where would you like to be? Right? Thinking through, is this practice going to give me the work that I want? For a radiologist, am I going to be able to review certain types of scans that I want to review? For a surgeon, am I going to have the kind of surgeries that I want to have? I think a lot of physicians think about compensation, call coverage, but I think it's often missed those nuanced things. And the devil is in the details and the assumptions around the details whenever you're reviewing those contracts.
well, and it's like you said earlier, trap door. But another way to put it is a colleague of ours, and this, words matter in
Yep.
They
contracts.
do.
And he was referring at the time when I was talking to him, he was talking about the way that disability insurance carriers have this language. Well, those were written by attorneys as well, right?
Right.
For that word to be a trap door, and it looks
Right.
tiny, maybe even be 3 letters or something like that, but it can matter into how that works for you when, as they say, the shit hits the fan. If it does,
Yeah,
what happens? And so that may not jump off the page to
it
somebody, and
won't.
these are smart people, right? But
Mhm.
they're not reading legalese the way you would.
They're not. I mean, I jokingly say I have a degree in words and I'm
Mm.
trained to weaponize them, right? And that's what lawyers do. I'll give you a classic example
I'm
that can
so glad we're recording this, Paul, because everything Ashley says is going to end up somewhere in our vernacular.
I
She's
know.
like this
do.
little, she's like
I
this little
do.
wisdom thing, just throwing out these tidbits of stuff.
I think actually, I just want to tell somebody go hug a cactus, like in a negative
Yes. Yeah.
you
Watch
know,
out for the
not
trap
as a
door, the legalese. I'm trained.
comparison.
Yeah,
I want to,
what?
instead of telling them to F off, I want to tell them, you know what, just go hug a cactus.
I like a
Like,
cactus today.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
carry on,
No,
Ashley.
Actually,
no,
yeah,
Sorry.
it's
she's like that. Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trained to use words to maximize our position and our
Yeah.
leverage, right? But I'll give you a classic example of language that even a genius can read and not understand what was missed, right? Take malpractice. We all know malpractice insurance is important. It's what covers you if you get sued by a patient, right? And we all understand that it's bad not to have it. And this is when I said earlier, the devil is in the assumptions of the details. I had a situation where a physician read a contract. They saw the language that the employer will pay for malpractice insurance. And their assumption was that that included tail coverage and post employment
Mm.
coverage, because to them it was one and the same, and it's not, right? Like if your contract does not specifically deal with what happens if you get sued after you leave, you do not have it. I don't care if they say they're supposed to provide it, if it doesn't say some language that indicates that, you don't have that. And that is one that is commonly missed. When I go through contracts with my client, I spend a good amount of time on malpractice. Like when I say I put it in crayon, I put it in crayon. I start with, this is what malpractice is, this is why we care about it, and whatnot. But a lot of times my client will tell me, oh, I have malpractice insurance, and they read it, and they do not understand that post employment coverage is not even mentioned, or they may not have it, or that they may be financially responsible for it, right?
Yeah.
Or your employer can change the policy, and now you didn't have to buy a tail before, and now you have to buy a tail, and you didn't account for that in your contract. And that's impactful because malpractice insurance is not cheap.
Yeah.
We're talking thousands, especially if you are a surgeon or an OB or you've been sued, right?
Or you
It
decide to
is
make a little extra money on a side gig doing something else, and all of a sudden you
right.
forget the implications back on the main con. Yep.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And
You
or
got,
the other one, just because the
yep.
work is volunteer doesn't mean you can't get sued for something that happened
That's right.
during
Mm.
it. There are sometimes it's not about getting more, sometimes it's about shifting the cost or avoiding the cost. Because malpractice insurance is not cheap.
Yeah.
One of the things that you said I wanted to just kind of circle back on and point out is that compensation, that word compensation, is different than salary. So
It is.
from an employee standpoint, you're like, what do I get paid? What's coming my way? What's going to arrive in
Mhm,
my bank account? What can I spend? That's the way we typically think. An
mhm,
employer is approaching that differently and going, okay, compensation, because there's all these different pieces that actually go into the totality of cost of employing you.
right.
So those things can be several, and you may have to pay for this or pay for that or not pay for this
Mhm,
or that.
mhm,
Something I point out is, when you're looking at people, it's not just about that salary. It's also about what other benefits they offer you, because they can
right.
be very impactful, whether it's, additional retirement stuff, or benefits that they just pay for where you don't have to. So
Mhm,
I'm glad that you use that word, because I think that more people need to start thinking about the compensation. And very few employers actually do sort of list out everything. Like they say,
mhm,
okay, here's everything that it costs us, so they can really see.
mhm.
That may help somebody make a decision instead of going to one employer versus the next.
It can. And I think it's also really important that how a physician thinks about compensation is fundamentally different than how the employer does. When a physician is talking about compensation, they're thinking salary, bonus, incentives, possibly a student loan repayment, possibly a training stipend there. Your employer is considering all of that, plus what they may pay for your malpractice premiums, plus what they might pay for certain benefits. So, whenever there's a conversation around compensation, the two sides are not talking about the same thing. They're not the same. What's all included in that consideration is not the same thing for both. And so while someone may say, I want my total compensation to be X, an employer might think it's already there because they've considered some other things. Now we got to get careful because I think it's a little bit of cheating to include too much stuff in that calculation. But those are all part of the conversations. But also in compensation, whenever you're thinking about it, it's kind of like, what costs do I not have now? What costs are they
Mm-hmm.
going to pick up that I don't have to pay? Like tail insurance is an example of that. Forgiveness of signing bonuses or commencement bonuses as you work there is a part of that. Repayment obligations are a part of that. There's so many things that go into it. And usually, like when I talk with my clients about compensation, I'm expanding upon what they had already thought about what they wanted to get. Because usually, it is, I want a signing bonus or I want some relocation funds, but there's other things that need to be considered as well. And that should be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to tell the employer that they're working with an attorney?
They don't have to. Some do, some don't. Most of my clients do. They'll say, I
Yeah.
need to meet with my attorney about it. And that's
Yeah.
when they'll get the, oh, we don't change anything,
Right.
right?
Right.
Some will say that. Some encourage them to seek an attorney. For me, it's a red flag when an employer is discouraging you from talking to one,
Yeah.
right? Because even if, and there are a good amount of employers, I think, that recognize the benefit of talking to one because it also helps kind of curb some requests from physicians because they don't understand the legal terms. Like, from an employer's perspective, they cannot explain legal terms to you, right? They
Mm-hmm.
can't have their lawyer explain legal terms to you. And so it's helpful for an employer when you have the right attorney, right, who understands the contract, who understands the terms, why it's a little bit different in the physician space. It's helpful to them for you to go talk to an attorney because you understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
What percentage of people are actually having contracts reviewed?
I think it varies by where you are in the stage. I think that most physicians who are up for partner involve an attorney. But I think that the segment that really does not take advantage, I would like to see take advantage of it more, are residents and fellows, people finishing
Mm-hmm.
their training. And I understand it, it's a cost. They are probably closer to that condition compliance that I was talking about, where they take what they're getting there and they're making money. They've never seen a figure like this. I would probably say it's probably half and half. There are a lot. Most of my
50% of the people
clients,
are not getting it done.
I
Wow.
think so. I think, and now we have some physicians who might run the contract through Chat GPT. I can't tell you how much I do not recommend doing that. Or they have a colleague look at it instead of an attorney because they sign their contract, which
Mm-hmm.
is fine whenever you want to talk about compensation and what you think you might want to get and what you think that, especially that person works there, but they're not going to understand the legal stuff. So, one of the missions that I have is to empower physicians to ask the questions, get the clarity, to get the legal review. But I think more can be engaging an attorney to look at those contracts because a lot of my clients that come to me are, I got screwed the first time and it's never going to happen again. And if we can prevent
Yeah.
that first time, that's really important.
Chris, earlier you brought up the portal and
Yeah. The
football
NIL
interview,
stuff.
but
Uh-huh.
it got me thinking about professional athletes, and they spend
Yeah.
their young adult life really honing their skills and trying to become
Mhm.
attractive so that they can ultimately get this contract, right?
Yep.
And
Mhm.
and they're going to have an agent help them. Not many people are going to go out there and try to actually negotiate their own contract with a professional team. So
And when they
why would
do, it
you
normally doesn't go well,
that
right?
Right.
They
right?
still hold those up as examples, right? Or, oh, let me bring my dad in. He's going to negotiate this multi-million-dollar contract. Yeah.
Right, but
Mhm.
Whatever it
that's
is.
the thing is that
Yeah.
why do you do that? Well, because there's millions of dollars at
Yeah.
risk, and you want to make sure you have the right thing, and you're getting offered. But there's also millions of dollars on the table for a lot of these physicians too,
Well,
right?
It
I
that's
is.
mean,
my point, right? If a professional athlete, or even these other ones, like we take it out of NIL, but even look at a professional athlete, it's they may be in a league for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, some stuff. Like there's anomalies that are long term. But when we sit down and talk to physicians, they're 26 to 33 as they're completing training, depending upon specialties and where they've gone, and then we help them see, hey, from here to 66 or 70 or whatever it is, it can be 12 million, 18 million, 30 million. You're
Mhm.
talking about lifetime quote unquote income value, right? Not to say human life, but like income, it's tens of millions of dollars.
mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think that's why it is so important, because a lot of times, I don't know, but that first contract may put the stake in the ground of where, if you left, that next contract is based off of. Okay, Dr. Smith was making 310,000 over here. If we hire and recruit him over here, that's what he's accustomed to. We're going to put him here. Whereas if it was Ashley, or had negotiated a contract, maybe market was actually at 360. But he didn't know that, because he just kind of said, oh, well, this seems normal. This is typical. That becomes the next ramping point for the next one, dramatically changing human life income. And so
I
I
agree
think
with
those
that.
details are so important. Yeah.
It is. So it can put a stake in the ground, right?
Yeah.
I think compensation depends on the employer, right? But a lot of like when we come down to the salary number, a lot of that is kind of tied, more so tied to the compensation data because that comes
Hmm.
out every year and you can adjust accordingly. But things like having tail because your prior employer gave it to you,
Yeah.
things like having a certain number of vacation days, things like certain kinds of bonuses, right? Can kind of put that stake in the ground. And if you're starting out behind everyone else, you're going to probably stay behind everyone else, or at least for that job, right? And it can be very impactful. It also can be very impactful in the cost of like what you get in your next offer. So, for example, if I did not get tail for myself, now I have to figure out how to get that paid by the next employer. Instead of me having a signing bonus that goes in my pocket, now I have a signing bonus that goes straight into paying for that tail,
Yeah.
right? So like what you get in your contract can really impact the next one.
Yeah. And y'all do it differently. I love your website, by the way. It's so clean and clear.
Mhm.
Can you walk through for someone who's listening to us right now?
Mhm.
There's the way that you do it on a fee basis, and the way maybe, and you have this great comparison, us and them kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
so there's ways that different people handle, just like in the financial. Some people pay commissions or fees. Some of this. There's different things in industries. Can you walk through how you've chosen to set up your firm?
Our ultimate goal is to empower physicians to get a better contract, right? And we know that cost is a consideration factor. So our approach is to do it on a flat fee basis. And how we approach it is one of our core tenets of the firm is that we want to make sure that we are providing more value than our competitors, right? There's a couple ways in which we do that. We offer unlimited attorney time, right? So that all your questions are answered. You're not signing something, you're not rushed, you get the time you need, right? We also offer post signature support, and that's a little bit different. We don't want anything to happen, but if something does happen, like within a certain period of time you sign your contract, you get to come back and talk to me about it. And we get to talk through how we deal with it and what the strategy is going to be. We also set ourselves apart by including an exit strategy up front, right? If we're going to get into a contract, if you're going to sign a contract, you need to know how to get out of it. So, like, those are all the things that are really important to physicians that we automatically include. And then it really just kind of depends as well. Our approach and how we kind of offered our packages to physicians really comes down to kind of where they are in their career, right? Someone who's finishing their training has different considerations than someone who is changing jobs, who has different considerations from someone who is becoming partner. And so we've kind of structured our packages so that you can kind of pick something that is tailored for where you are, right? So we have our set packages. There are sometimes things that don't always necessarily fit neatly in a bucket. So we
Mhm.
do have add-ons. Like, so for example, there are some physicians who are going to just want a contract review and they want to know the legal terms. They want some recommendations on what they can get changed, and that's all they need. But then there's also some physicians who need negotiations, who might need some red line changes, who might want me to talk to their lawyer. Then you can add on negotiations. There are some physicians who have an employment agreement plus a whole other kind of documents, right? So there are ways in which you can add on those things that fit what are in front of you. Our goal was so that it's kind of like we wanted our physicians to be able to come in, get what they need at the best value to them, as well as pick what they need versus they don't need and kind of go from there. At the end of the day, we want to empower physicians and we want to make sure they're educated on these contracts. I know I have a very teaching approach because what's we're going through on this contract, the services we kind of created around your review and the different packages are designed that you can carry it with you so that when you look at the next contract, you know exactly what it is that you're looking at. You know exactly what that trapdoor is. So if you choose to go back to an attorney, you say, I know exactly what this is. I want to make this change. I want help doing that versus I don't understand what I'm reading. And so our services that we offer on a flat fee basis are kind of designed to do that, to give more value to the physician, to empower them and educate them on the legal terms, while at the same time giving them tailored packages that really fit where they are.
There's a lot of different specialties in the legal field, just like medicine. How did you get into this?
Oh, I am a twin. My twin sister is the emergency medicine physician. And when she finished her residency, I think it's about 15 years now, it was very clear to me that the training doesn't teach you this part of practicing medicine. At the time, I had a traditional path as a lawyer. I was in house for a big tech company where I was responsible for all their contracts. And so I was helping my sister with hers. Then it became her friends and her colleagues and more colleagues. And after a few years, I had an unpaid side hustle where it would be so
Did you have
bad.
your
Like
tail coverage?
an unpaid side hustle where it would be I'm showing up for dinner with my sister and there's a couple physicians there with their contracts for us to talk to. And it was just something that I really enjoyed that I got really good at. And so when it came time for me to kind of choose where I wanted to go with my career, I wanted to do something that I enjoyed doing. I really enjoy being of service and helping. And this was a way that I could do that. And so I sat down and thought about, okay, how can I deliver something to physicians in a way that is easy for their life? So I wanted to kind of mirror how they consult each other, right? You reach out when you need the help, you get the help, and then you take the help and you apply the help. And that's kind of how I got into it. This is our 6th year. I've been practicing almost 20 years, and it hurt to say that out loud. Um, and I've been doing physician contracts for about 15. But Contract RX, we're in our 6th year, and it's something I'm really proud of, and I really enjoy doing it. And we have some really happy clients who refer their colleagues to us, who circle back to us. Even it may not even be on legal matters that are about physician contracts, right? Like I'm their lawyer, right? And so it has been quite the ride providing this kind of help to physicians.
What's been the brightest part of this path that you've chosen?
Oh gosh, when we get certain wins, I love getting that email when a client, it could be a year or two from when I helped them, and they're like, I'm so glad you got this for me because this just happened and I didn't have to. Those moments empower. And I really, really love when I am working with someone who's finishing training and they come to me and they're really hesitant. I don't want to ask for too much, or they're using kind of that language of being hesitant and not confident in asking for something and getting them something, right? And getting them to see that it's just ask for it. Those are always the bright spots for me
Do
whenever
you
I
feel
can
like it's something like that they feel like it's a thing of greed of asking for more,
No, I think
just
that
not
there
deserving
is.
it?
I think it depends, right? There are some
Yeah.
where they feel like I don't want to ask for too much. This is a lot of money. I don't want to lose the offer. There are some who just don't know they can ask for it.
Right.
Um, and I think there are some who, now don't get me wrong, there are some who are like, I want X. And it probably comes down to someone's personality as well. But I really think if I could just, boil it down, I really think it is kind of how they survive their training, so to speak,
Yeah.
where you suck it up, take what you get, and be happy to get whatever you get.
Yeah.
And that carries over. And that falls away the more senior they get in their career. But I really think that is what creates that resistance in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where they
Well,
came from, if their family was in medicine. Oh, okay. This is relates. This is what it is. Maybe other
Mhm,
friends. I
yeah.
think your
mhm.
peer group there, but uh, I think it's, if you have somebody who's gone through training and that have learned how to live on 62,000 a year, 67.5, so
Right.
like, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, in August you're going to make 370,000. It's very difficult to wrap your mind, and then
Yes.
and it's such a gap between where you are and where they have the opportunity to go. And such, I agree with you, Ashley. I think some people are like, wow, okay,
Mhm.
even if it's less than what they were thinking or different, it's almost like that's close enough to where I was going. I don't want to mess this up.
Right.
Right. And I think actually what you're providing is that confidence to be able to say, hey, I've looked at these for 15, 20 years. I understand the details. Here are some things in my professional attorney opinion you should ask about. You should clarify. You could get some.
Right.
And Paul, to your point before, whether they get more compensation or whatever, what if it's not, but they just feel more comfortable with what they have?
Mhm.
They're not just
Hmm.
second guessing themselves all the time, feeling like, did I get a good deal? Did I have this? We had this. Paul and I were just meeting with a leader in the medical community. He was sharing with us the changes coming out of COVID, and
Oh
then
yeah.
he also mentioned the radiologist thing as well. But as we were visiting and working Saturdays and part days, and the incomes jumped up, and when was interesting, and I was like, well, I thought that was going to be the specialty impacted first or most by AI. He's like, actually different. Here's what it is, and here's what's moving. So there is what's the perception that's out there, and is the reality that they're dealing with. And if they're in the picture frame, it's very difficult to know what those outside sources are, right?
Mhm.
And so I agree with what you're saying, Ashley.
So I want to touch on the perception versus reality thing too, because something you said earlier, Ashley, when you're going out there and you're looking for different places, I've heard people say, "Oh, well, I don't know where I'm going. Whatever I can get," like as if
Yeah.
they're not highly qualified, and
Right,
somebody should be lucky to have them, right? But there is that
right.
sort of the perception of whatever I can get. So, do you think that's this perception that I don't want to rock the boat. So maybe they don't even hire an attorney because if they'll be happy to get an offer and I better sign it before they withdraw it. And then to go one step further, when you start negotiating, maybe it's because of the fear. If I do that, I'll lose this offer. And what percentage of people is that actually happening to? You go in and you negotiate, but you didn't lose the job offer. You just didn't get exactly what you wanted. Or
Right.
are some employers just going, you know what? Forget it. I just, that doesn't seem reasonable, does it?
No, yeah. So I think there is, from the physician side, an element of I don't want to rock the boat. What they don't know is that that first offer is often not the best. Employers expect to negotiate. Now, I think what goes a long way for empowering physicians is one, having the compensation data, right? Because that truly changes the
Right.
conversation when I say, well, this is what the data is. But the other part that really empowers them is they don't know how to ask for it,
Yes.
right? So a lot of when I give my recommendations, I include, and this is one of the other unique things that we do, I do negotiation coaching. That's included in a review package that we do, where I coach you on how to add, like what to ask for, how to ask for it, and the tone of it, right? And so it is like you, and I think they're afraid of sounding too demanding, but there's a way to ask for certain
Yeah.
things, even if it is additional compensation or something else. And so I think a lot of it is they have this fear of rocking the boat while at the same time not knowing how to carefully do it. And so I notice anytime I'm going through a contract with a client and I'm giving my recommendations and I'm doing negotiation coaching, there is a fundamental difference in how they feel about the ask after I've talked to them about how to ask for it.
And if they have
Is
the
there
data, they can anchor that. They have more
They
confidence going
can.
into it. Hey, here's what the numbers tell me, right? To let the numbers tell the story and you do it. I agree with you. I think as any business owner, you have different experiences with people that are asking for things or whatever.
Mhm.
There's a dramatic difference or an emotion translation of communication when it is felt as a demand or an ultimatum versus an ask or a question. The coaching, I think, for you there is, they probably spend a lot of time learning bedside manner if that's what they're still doing.
Right.
Whereas again, this is all new, right? This
Mhm.
is this is a hierarchical thing where I've been trained, I've been told where to go. Paul and I did a podcast with somebody and last year, I think, and they were talking about for some of these people, this is their first time at adulting. This is their first time in decades. They've always probably been the smartest. They're hardest working. There's discipline. They've got this thing. They've deferred education. But now all of a sudden people go, okay, now you're out of training,
Mhm.
you get to go over here. And they're like, whoa, I'm very comfortable in the academic training world, right? And it's all
Mhm.
different. And I think that bridge that you're talking about there is so important of how do you communicate that? How do you ask about it? And I love the data point because then it lets that be the port of conversation rather than a conflict of Dr. Shaw, you didn't offer me enough. Therefore,
Right.
there's something wrong with your offer. That can be almost any human goes into defense mode at that point, right? You're now personalized it.
I think it's one of those things where anytime you're bringing something to an employer, the best negotiation position to have is to give them a feeling of choice, right? And I think that as people, we use that a lot. Like, for example, I have a 7-year-old, right? Do you want chicken or do you want a burger, right? I've given you the dinner's going to be chicken or a burger, but you think you have a choice, right? And
And
I
I'm
think that
already
that's
making chicken.
right, right. I'm going to push you towards chicken,
That's
right?
it.
And so I think that there is an element of that with employers, right? So
Yeah.
having the data helps, knowing how to ask for it, and even having the data helps, but knowing what you can ask for, right?
Yeah.
There have been many times when my client would say, "I didn't know I could ask for that," but one of the ways that like one of the things I constantly tell my clients is if you want to raise and there's a number you have in mind, right? They'll say, well, should I ask for the higher number so that I land where I am? And you can, but employers expect that, right? And so I like to often say, I was hoping for a total compensation of X. I'm flexible on how we get there. How close can we get to blah, 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 right? That signals to them you want more, you're not drawing a hard line, and you've also not given out a number. You're putting them in a position to bid against themselves, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is a softer way. It's not a demand. It communicates a desire in a way that can be heard. Now, an employer's response, if their answer is no, their answer is no. But oftentimes, they will find some other way if you indicate flexibility in how you get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Is
How
there
often
a
do you think that
recent
you bump into somebody that doesn't they don't even know the full benefit of their package? And Paul and I meet with people in our team, and they almost because they've become used to, okay, I have to defer 8%, therefore I get the like they don't even it doesn't recognize to them that there's an extra 5,000 a year, or 10,000 or 20 of matching dollars or benefits or HSA premiums or student loans as you're talking about. When you go through it, sometimes you're like, hey, this is a good contract. By the way, it has all of these to go to that compensation package, as we talked about from salary. Is it sometimes you're just educating them and saying, hey, this is all the things, these are the pros and the cons. By the way, this is a really good contract
Mhm.
for you. And they just don't realize that. Okay.
Sometimes, I
Yeah.
think most of the time they don't even have that information, right? A lot of some of the advice that I give is go get clarity on X,
Ah, gotcha.
right? Where it'll
Yeah.
just state a benefit, but I have to explain, well, what does that mean? Because it could be
Yeah.
this, it could be that, it could be that. Let's get some clarity on that, right? Like that's, for example, anytime you're talking about an incentive bonus, that way, it's like, what is this tied to? Is this good citizenship where I'm just showing up, doing the job, and getting along with everyone? Is there some other metric, right? Getting those details, and then is it doable? Are the others getting this, right? Like that, because we can have a package in front of you that looks great, where it says, here's your compensation, here's your bonus. But if no one's getting that bonus, I don't care about the bonus, then
Yeah.
we need to get this better someplace else, right? And so I think that all of those things, physicians, especially early in their coming out of their training, just don't know to even
Yeah.
ask about the metrics. They're very trusting. Physicians, I think, in general, are very trusting, which is foreign to me because as lawyers, we're not that, right? We are trained to be skeptical and not trusting and to, play devil's advocate. And physicians aren't trained in that way. They're trained to be more collaborative, trained to be more collegial, trained to be more trusting. And I'm not saying, all those things are helpful, right? They're not helpful whenever you're trying to advocate for yourself. And so asking open-ended questions, getting clarity really goes a long way to even understand, to your point, the full benefit and the full value of your package. But it also goes in a really long way of identifying the actual earning potential and where you should push for more and where you shouldn't.
Do you ever have an instance where you got somebody's contract reviewed and you said, I would suggest that you go back and you request these things, and maybe they said, oh, I don't know that I'm comfortable with that because they felt that, nervousness about getting the contract rejected or asking for too much,
Mm-hmm.
but you felt confident, and then maybe they were just reluctant, but then they went ahead with it, and then it surprised them that they
Mm-hmm.
got it.
That happens a lot. It happens all the time, right? So there are some who have the confidence, there are some who are hesitant, and that impacts the kind of coaching I do. And which is why I do the unlimited time with them, because you need to go have the conversation and then come back and talk to me about it. But I think it happens quite a bit where there is a surprise that they got something, or that it was easier than they thought it would be. Um, because sometimes, I think they're expecting, if I ask for X, we're going to have to go round and round about it. And oftentimes the answer is okay, right? Which is like, surprising, because in
Wait,
their
what? That's it?
mind, yeah, in their mind, they set up this whole scenario of where I'm not going to get it, I'm going to have to fight for it, or they're going to take it away, and it just simply wasn't that. And I think that that starts with employers communicating this is standard, or this
Yeah.
is a good offer. That has way more of an impact than I think physicians realize, how they've internalized that and calibrated their behavior appropriately. And what I really enjoy doing is like, let's put that down. Let's take this off. I know they said that, but here's how I want you to ask. And then going from there. And usually, again, I can't guarantee results, but
Mhm.
usually we get something. I could probably count on one hand how many times we ran into an absolute no. And usually there were larger issues that I would say, I sometimes the recommendation is I wouldn't recommend signing, but if you do, here are the risks.
Hmm.
Sometimes that happens.
Have you ever looked at a contract and said, "Hey, this is great, this is attractive," but that the physician felt like there was just something off about it and didn't feel comfortable, like you just couldn't identify, but from a legal perspective and everything that you review, you felt like it was good?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think I have had it where I've had to explain because they didn't understand the term or they had a certain assumption around the term. And I've had to really kind of dig into this matters when X, Y, and Z. And if this, then X, like, and that usually gets them over it. But sometimes what a physician may be feeling is not the contract, is the actual work environment. This is one of the things I think physicians can really kind of think about when you're interviewing. That is you checking the vibe check, right? Is this a vacation culture? Like, you can give me a lot of vacation days, but if no one is taking vacation, it doesn't matter. Are the physicians happy here? Is there turnover? Are like all these things? And sometimes the contract will tell you that, right? Like, there are sometimes I'll review a contract and I'll read the language and like, there's a story here. There's a reason why a lawyer drafted that and put that in here, right? For example, one of a big red flag to me is the ability to terminate your contract without cause. So resign from day one. Sometimes an employer will say you can't resign for those first couple of years. That is very telling for me. That is a big red flag because it tells me they have a retention issue. Which, if you have a retention issue, there's something going on. Your doctors aren't happy, and do you really want to go someplace where the doctors aren't happy?
Hmm.
Mhm.
And you're only working with the physicians on the employee side. You're not working with, or maybe you do work with smaller practices that now actually have to create contracts for new incoming physicians.
No, I do not. I do not represent hospitals or practices, right? I am more so on the employee side, or if you're becoming partner. One of the reasons I do not do that is that's less of a physician contract review and more of a healthcare transaction, which is a completely different type of law. But also, we see anywhere from 5 to 600 physicians every year. If I start representing practices, I'm gonna have a lot of conflicts
Yeah.
in
Mm,
doing that. But also, I prefer this side. I want to be on the little guy's side. They have their own lawyer.
yeah.
I don't draft the employment agreements. I'll draft red lines to get a position better for my client, but I don't represent the
Hmm.
practice.
Hmm. You said something earlier too that kind of slipped by, was just getting them reviewed or updated, and not reviewed initially. Let's say somebody's gone there. What's a good time frame of having your contract re-reviewed at some point? I mean, we're not signing these things for 20, 30 years.
Mhm.
Should they have it re-reviewed, or how long are they typically good for?
It varies. Most contracts will have a set term, whether it's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and then oftentimes they're evergreen, which means they auto renew every year. And it depends. Sometimes during the renewal process, the compensation changes. I always recommend re-reviewing your contract every couple of years, at least the compensation, because one, the data has changed.
Hmm.
And now maybe your duties have changed. Maybe, you have, and you've been at the practice, right? And so you have a better idea of kind of what's going on. I also recommend, sometimes practices buy each other out and you got a new contract in front of you, right?
Yeah.
You should have that reviewed. Sometimes your duties have expanded, right? You started doing one thing and now something has happened in the practice where you have to do another. I would recommend re-reviewing your contract to see what we can add to it. But I think that there has to be a general sense check every couple years when it comes to your contract, whether you are actually looking at the actual terms or whether you are just doing that from a compensation standpoint.
Um, I want to just kind of rapid fire some quick questions for
Uh
you.
oh.
just
Okay.
just just to see a quick response here. One contract clause everyone should understand.
They're non compete,
A contract myth you'd love to kill.
that nothing's negotiable.
The word standard in contracts, true or false?
False. Uh, Depends. There are some standard legal clauses that exist, but everything's negotiable.
The biggest warning sign a contract wasn't lawyer reviewed.
An extremely one sided contract with terms that are detrimental to the physician.
And one sentence every physician should be able to say to themselves before signing.
I understand this document and I'm happy with it.
I love that.
What does your 7-year-old say when everything's negotiable, Mom? You're like,
My
no.
son,
I heard you on this podcast. You said everything is negotiable.
No chicken.
No.
it's different with my son. It's different. I had all these ideas of what kind of parent I would be. I would never do this, never do that. I fold like a table when it comes to my son. But he's a great negotiator, and he's learned that from mommy. And I believe in self advocating,
Yeah.
right? But I'm also the kind of parent I will fall down the why rabbit hole, right? Of explain why and give you some choices. But I do use my skills and give him the illusion of choice quite often to move things along. But he is quite the self negotiator for sure.
That's great.
You think he's got a future in doing what you do?
I don't know. He has the attention to detail. I see him actually being a great engineer.
Yeah. Well, that's
Mhm.
attention to detail too.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
analytical people.
Yeah.
Very much so. A rule follower.
Probably will marry a physician. That's what I see.
I don't know. It's funny because so my husband's the exact opposite of me. He's very laid back, chill. I have pizzazz, right? And our son looks just like dad, but jokes on him because he has mommy's pizzazz.
Mhm.
And it is, I think for him, honestly, I just want him to be happy and to enjoy what he does. I think that that is something that a lot of physicians are unhappy and they just suck it up. And I think a lot of physicians don't realize one, no is a total and complete sentence, but two, you can opt for something else. I do think a lot of the physicians who are coming out of training see that because they want more work life balance. But I think that self advocating for a career or a work environment that fits your life and not the other way around is something I really advocate for and really wish more physicians and people went after. Mhm.
If you could only have our listeners remember one thing about contracts, what would it be?
I I think the biggest takeaway that I would like physicians to have when looking at their contracts is remembering that this contract is drafted to benefit the employer, not you. And even if you can't see how it may harm you or disadvantage you, doesn't mean that it doesn't. And it's really important that we acknowledge kind of your limitations whenever you're reading legal documents, because lawyers have a degree in words and we're weaponized to use them. So you need to have your own lawyer on your side that helps you get the best deal you can.
I think that's great.
That's
Mhm.
fantastic.
Before we wrap up, the name of our show is called The Patient Physician. So tell us what that means to you.
Well, first, when I read it, I thought it was, I thought that, the physician is the patient, right? Which they're unaccustomed to, right? Because they're the ones, right? But the physician is the patient, probably the hard patient, but is the patient. And sometimes they need to be taken care of, whether it is, ensuring that their financial affairs are where they should be, ensuring that their contract is where it should be, or their life has a balance that they need that they are too afraid to ask for. Like that's what I thought. It is someone who is, instead of asking the physician for something, they are the patient that's getting their need met. That was my first thought when I thought about it.
Well, that's why we asked the question because it means different things to different people, and I always love to hear the various twists. But I agree with you just wholeheartedly that I
Mhm.
think that they spend their entire life taking care of everybody else
Yes.
and forget how to allow themselves also to be helped and be taken care of, right?
Yes.
And be advocated for like you're doing so much for the folks that you help. So Ashley, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for everybody that's been listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you go out and get your contract reviewed. I think it's probably the best money that you'll spend on your career path. I really do think that. And if you enjoyed today's story, please like and subscribe, or also share your story with us because there is somebody that is patiently waiting to hear it. Thanks so much, Ashley.
Thank you for
Thanks,
having me.
Ashley. Yeah, you bet.